Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today's episode is going to be a banger, as the kids say, and it might go on slightly longer than usual because I've got 4 guests with me today. I've got Chaz, Sam, Matt, and Eric, all former podcast guests, all Discord community members, and all great guys who also happened to attend Battle for Los Angeles 5 a few weeks ago in Victorville, California. For those who don't know, BFLA is an objective-based Milsim-style event set in a fictional future where giant corporations wage war with armies of mercenaries, etc. I'm sure we'll get into some details about the storyline, though if I know Chaz and Sam, they were not there for the lore.
There was lore?
Yeah, exactly. So, for those who don't know, Battle for Los Angeles is organized by Desert Fox Events, run by Jet Desert Fox, who most of you would know from YouTube, and it had over 850 attendees. Eric, in particular, who is the founder of Gun Gamers and Gun Gamers Events, was the co-leader, if I understand correctly, of the ERT team that ended up winning the day, and therefore Sam, Chaz, and Matt were all of his subordinates, directly or indirectly. Obviously, a huge event of this kind is something that leads to tons of different perspectives, interesting moments, and so this is why I'm so excited and thrilled to have this distinguished panel of lads here to talk about it and to go through what sounds like an absolutely fun event. So, guys, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, good to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before we get into it, apologies to Nick, who just couldn't join us today.
Rip.
The first question for you guys, 850 people seems like a lot of people. Was this the biggest event that you guys had ever attended playing Airsoft?
I would say no. I've gone to Copperhead last year was that or slightly more.
Yeah.
850, 860.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Matt?
I've been to 2 events.
I mean,
I've been to 2 events this size or similar.
Okay.
Guardian Center's Milsim West in 2021 was 800 players plus cadre and like some guest stars. So that was pretty close. And then Bad Blood up in the Northeast was like 800 to 1,000 a couple of years I went. So
obviously, like an event of that size, number one, brings all types of players together of all backgrounds, age groups, and also interests. Like I had Rob from Gunfather Milsim on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he introduced me to this expression that Airsoft is a big tent and there's space for a lot of people, right? Mm-hmm. And as a consequence of that, like you get people coming up who are like Milsim players versus LARPers versus, casual players or Speed QB players or what have you. So what was the player distribution like at the event from your perspective? Was it mostly like more serious, or was there a good mix of everything?
I'm going to say that the layout was almost exactly like my standard weekend skirmish. Like we had 60% people in camo, and then maybe 20% in sort of like factional clothing, like red plaid shirts and black jeans if they were cool, and blue jeans if they were that one dude. And then on the other team, they would have like their khaki shirts and blue jeans. And then like the last 15% were goofballs with their regular speed setups. I saw one person wearing a tactical corset. There was a ninja and a samurai, those kinds of people.
Don't forget the squad of wizards.
There was a squad of wizards.
Yeah, they were dressed very much like wizards.
They were like flowing bright red robes, like cartoonishly bright. It was great.
Sam, was that Cesius in the car with you when he turned around and said, "I think there's wizards behind us" as we were driving?
Yeah, that's what he said. That's what he said.
It's like the quote of the weekend.
So did it? I guess my question is, did it really appeal to all of those types of players, or did they just happen to show up and that's what they were wearing as kit, or were there opportunities to do a whole lot of that?
I felt like it was this game was different from the Lion Claws events or the American Milsim events that I've gone to in the past, in that it was, like you said, an open tent, and there was room for everyone and all of those play styles. But I think this event also allowed for certain kits that you could never wear at a Milsim West game. You would never be able to wear a black powder red earth kit of just a red t-shirt, a multicam black plate carrier, and black jeans. But that fit perfectly at this event.
It did.
And that's something I really appreciate about like the Desert Fox events uniform rule set from like a design standpoint, is it makes that a sandbox that you can play in with a wide variety of toys. And I think a lot of the way that Desert Fox events is designed is kind of to try to be that sandbox.
I actually really liked that from like a regular cosplayer point of view. The wide definitions, green, red, black, go for it. And I really enjoyed that. I mean, those 3 words were somehow difficult for some. I mean, hard.
The guy in the blue jeans.
But that I think is where you get the biggest frustration with like that high of a player count, is that even if like 1% of the people who are going don't read the rules, that's still 8.5 people who didn't read the rules.
Really, hey? Yeah. Because I was looking through the rules. Go ahead, Matt.
It was really cool because like I love different costumes, and I changed my outfit the second day, and I was wearing shorts, and I was wearing this wonderful shirt. Collar shirts, guys.
Nice.
And I had a really great time after I dumped all my extra like Milsim looking gear, and I was like, I'm just gonna go do me, and I really enjoyed that, having that freedom to do that like you could not at another event.
Yeah, and I was looking through the rule set, and I mean, it was pretty detailed. Definitely one thing that struck me is that sort of freedom of like, this is an example of 3 different loadouts for ERT. These are the main colors. This is your accent colors, and then don't use these colors, which, I mean, when you're talking about no blue jeans, it's because blue is not the color you guys are supposed to be wearing, or were supposed to be wearing, I should say, which clearly that did not get through to that one individual. But for the rest of them, you know, like, it gives you a lot of creative freedom. And from a game design standpoint too, like, it allows more people to take part in the way that makes sense or that is feasible for them, both, you know, either sensibly or economically, depending on their particular situation.
Or just what they're interested in.
Yeah, like whatever blows their skirt up, man.
Yeah, totally.
There were skirts to be blown.
Especially those wizards, apparently, right?
No, yeah, dude, like they look great in the wind, man. And then they'd be like, Avada Kedavra.
That's hilarious. So player count aside, and I think, you know, the percentage that you said, Eric, is so funny. Like, 1%, but that's still 8.5 people. Yeah. Aside from like the sheer number, like, what was the AO like, and what, like, was it big enough? Did it feel crowded? Like, how did that all shake out? Because I understand, like, it was a little rough in terms of terrain.
The terrain was very rough, but I mean, the AO was massive. I never once felt jammed up with other players. I mean,
I felt more. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Chaz.
Oh, I was going to say, you know, there were roughly about the same number of players at last year's Copperhead down in Playas, New Mexico, at the Playas Training Center. And to me, that's a smaller AO than this. This was a massive AO, and it seemed to stretch and stretch. And we got into engagements. There was always somebody to fight. But it didn't feel like you were like, okay, there's a crowd over here to our right, and there's a crowd of, you know, TSS to our left, and you know, so you had 4 different directions to fight in.
Right.
So it never felt crowded. It was
like you were coming around a corner and there's like 40 guys just waiting for you or whatever.
Well, that did happen, but
they were like spread out, and they would have like machine guns across the street, and they would have a line, and you'd know where they were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I would say like the gunfight heavy areas felt like heavy gunfights. It felt like, you know, at least squad on squad size engagements. Yeah. You know, most of the gunfights I got into were with like squad level at least elements. There wasn't a lot of times where it was like onesies, twosies, like trying to clear through the AO all dynamic. It was like, no, these are squad and platoon size movements. Like, move with as many people as possible, or you will just die.
If you have a brain in your head, every time you respawn, you're like, there's some dudes over there. Let's just run with them real quick.
Right.
And so you end up with like these totally awesome different squads throughout the day, and that was pretty cool.
Just picked up many different players, and you just grab people as you go. There was times when our squad was split. I was trying to find Steve and Sam, and somehow, apparently, they had this app that I should have been using. It might have helped me, but in my defense, it wasn't working for me in the morning on Saturday.
And we know how you are with technology, Chaz. Yeah. So I mean, that's there's that too.
Beat the phone against a rock.
Exactly. So before we get into it too far into detail, I just want to understand, like, overall at a higher level, like, what is the objective of the game? Like, what is the ultimate way that
Battlefield
it's played?
In real life.
Okay, so expand on that a little. Or is it like
conquest?
Conquest. Okay, so like holding terrain by the end of the day. Okay.
So the game is broken up. The way Desert Fox Events runs is the game is broken up into 3 rotations on Saturday. There's check-in before the gameplay rotations. There's also check-in on Friday. Mm-hmm. But then there's the 3 rotations Saturday, morning, afternoon, night. And then you've got the 1 rotation on Sunday, which is just a long day rotation. Mm-hmm. And the way that those work is that each team has objectives marked out on the virtual map in the app. So you open the app, you know where your objectives are, and you send people out to capture those objectives. And whoever holds them longer bleeds the other team of tickets, and whatever team has less tickets at the end of it wins. Or it loses, excuse me.
Yeah.
That's the central concept of how Desert Fox Events runs. It's very simply Battlefield Conquest in real life.
So you and we'll talk about this in a second. So you as a commander are issuing objectives through the app, and you as a frontline player, unless you're Chaz, are receiving your orders through the app. Is that how it's intended to run?
Not with the current build, because the current build doesn't have messaging, and also the current build. I'm gonna say it straight up, like just at the beginning. I commend players for their patience with the app this last weekend, because it was having a lot of major issues. But I do want to also give the app team a lot of credit that they were resolving issues like as they popped up. And by, end of Sunday, like the app was relatively stable, but I treated it very much like an old school territory control airsoft game, mm-hmm. where I just knew where people were and where the objectives were with an app assistant. The actual like capturing and everything was a little bit jank. We were able to make it work, intermittently, but it was, I treated it like an old school airsoft game at the end of the day.
And I found the app to be functional as a map that showed you where the objectives were and where you were. So like first trip out from base, we had to use the app to figure out what even is this objective and make our way to it. So that functionality, it worked for us and our squad. And every time we were, team left flank, basically, definitely on the first day, we'd come back to base, we'd respawn, we'd be like, well, they flanked us about here, so we'll head out to there and try to outflank them some more. Mm-hmm. And it was very functional in that regard. We were able to, on a rare occasion, like have the app open and see that we were claiming one of the control points. But I'd say that was the exception more than like we lived and died by what it said.
Yeah.
What about you, Matt? What was your experience with the app? Because we know what Chaz had kind of experience with.
Mine was about the same as Sam. It worked really well as a mm-hmm. map, because that was a big AO. It was good to have like an active map where you could see you as you were moving across it. It made orienting yourself super, super duper easy.
I love the 3D models.
But mine just said connected at the bottom all day long. So it never actually connected. It was just connecting, through the whole day. And it's so like I couldn't do my hit button and like any of that stuff, but it was great for like seeing where I was.
Gotcha.
Now they said that there were certain features of the yes, hats off to the deployment team of the app, but they rolled it out Saturday morning.
Yes,
that should never have happened. That should have been done Friday night at the latest. But I also heard that even though it said you were connected, and so there were certain things it may have been capturing a point, or capturing the control point, but you didn't know. You had no feedback on it.
Yeah,
and they disabled a bunch of the functions of it.
Yeah, as someone who was like in on a lot of the development talk, and I was doing some of the consulting on Friday night too, as we were testing it with the app team. So essentially what happened is the old app team ghosted Desert Fox events. Like the guys who built the original Blue Fox tracker, that's why it's a totally new app, because they just totally ghosted them and they had to scramble to find a new team. And I think that team, should have absolutely had a build ready earlier. And then this wound up being basically a torture test of it, which is why at the end of the day, like as I was seeing it, I'm like, well, I'm not going to force people to bog down and like use this app. So I really tried to use it as just a guideline, but apparently, yeah, a lot of what was broken was on the user side because it was such a wide variety of hardware it was being deployed onto. Again, all of this testing could have been done well ahead of time. That may be related to the fact that I don't know when this new team was hired because I don't know when the old team ghosted them. So, did the app work? Not as intended.
But it's like that old saying, right? Like no plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? So there you go. But despite that, it sounds okay. Firstly, it doesn't sound like it ruined any of your days. Like I think, the app not working was, it's probably just a footnote, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
So
it was good enough, like, because there were enough, like, active that a squad-sized element had a useful map, and that was all that really mattered to us, right? It worked that far, and then the rest of the day was just like, whoosh.
So, Eric, from your standpoint as the war boss, the head honcho, the big cheese, or I guess the co-big cheese in this situation.
Well, shout out Spencer. Like we've said my name a lot in this podcast, but like Spencer was the other ERT war boss. The usual breakdown is I was the task force commander, whereas then Spencer was the ground force commander. And the way that's usually broken down is that like the task force commander will be like someone notable or like an influencer or whatever. And they'll be like, okay, well, we'll give that person one side control. And then like the ground force commander will be Milsim West Cadre.
Right.
Because this is like, a joint venture between Jet and Milsim West. So like Josh and Brian help run it. There's a bunch of Milsim West Cadre there. And then on the other side, it was Jenny Lynn on the as the commander, task force commander for TSS, and then Sean Prosen from Milsim West as the ground force commander there.
So Spencer, how did you and Spencer organize yourselves in terms of your own leaders, like your own like leadership teams that you were then applying throughout the day?
So both of us are very used to like the Milsim West style of organization because those are like the games we predominantly do that type of stuff for. But I had to find a way to ad hoc toss it together in less than 24 hours.
Okay.
Where normally like I would have had full email contacts, rosters, everything. Like that's what I would use for my games and for Milsim West. So for this, I was just showing up. I was literally just walking around the parking lot. I had a QR code on my phone. I was walking up to people and saying, hey, do you guys want to get in the ERT Discord? And I got like 130 players almost into the Discord by Saturday.
Wow. Okay. And so then how did you manage? Because you mentioned the app was, okay, you were beta testing it basically, right?
I told people up front, I'm like, hey, app is giving us these problems. I know where the objectives are. I'm going to like help you guys coordinate a plan and know where to hold. So I started using streets as our like firing lines. And Spencer, like I would just run things by Spencer as he was back there. But we tried to alternate where he would be out and then I would be back. Then I would be back or then I would be out and then he would be back. Same type of thing.
Right. And did you have like, I guess my last question is like, did you organize yourself like in a tree? Like, did you have people underneath you who had people underneath them and stuff like that? Okay. And so,
and that was what I tried to impose at day, like at the day of. I put in the Discord all the pre-planning stuff and then just had like, hey, if you want to read up, it's in this channel on the Discord. And then the day of, people knew what I was talking about when I said, hey, I want this section, people who want to go left, you're section 1. People who want to go in the middle, your sections 2 and 3. People who want to go right, your section 4. So you guys just pick your buddy squad leaders, put them all on radio channel this, and this for each section, and then have 2 people from each section on this radio channel for command. And that was like as much as I was able to crash course.
And I ended up the guy for section 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was on the command net all day. Go ahead, Eric. Tell us how.
And how did that go for
went.
You?
I think we established that airsofters don't know how to use radios.
Yeah.
Really? Oh my goodness, that is a shock. Real dropping some bombs here.
So
Shocking
the command net. I'm used to AMS games, and I've been on the platoon net, which I would say was more organized than our command net. And I would try to report into Eric, what I was seeing, what was happening on the left. Like I said, he said section 1 was on the left, so we were left flank. We tried to hold true to that. Our squad, at least, tried to hold true to that.
We went
left. We were so very left, yeah.
We found the edge of the AO.
We did.
It was an asset that I was left-handed.
Any further left and you were going off the field, right?
Well,
we may have been out of bounds.
Our first trip out, we made it all the way to their side of the map, north of their fob, and we're about to pinch in, when finally they were like, oh, we should kill those guys.
Yeah, it turned out, I looked later, we were less than 100 yards from their spawn at that point.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'd say first trip out was like the only time section 1 was really all that organized. We probably had 50 solid dudes that were paying attention to me telling them where to go and what to do. We had a very, very simple, it was okay, we're going to the leftmost objective, and if we run into any contact, flank left or more left.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple, and actually everybody followed it to a T. We went so hard left, like we said, we ended up 100 yards from their fob first trip out. But the command net, I was a little disappointed. I would report into Eric where we were, how our objective was going, and every time I'd die, I'd tell him I was headed back to base. And every time I saw Eric, he would tell me where to go next, and it was mostly left. Because I would tell him, hey, there's a platoon size element about here on the left. He's like, cool, go kill that. And so that's what I would do.
And then it was fun because I would be standing next to Sam. And then we would all hear the next part of his story as we were all like getting ready to rush people. I want you to all envision this, that we were all like in a stack right next to Sam as he continues his story about the command net, listening to it from his shoulder.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So you're hearing that at the same time as he's hearing it, basically, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. And I would keep the command net on a not a loudspeaker, but a shoulder mic instead of in my ear, so everybody around me could hear it. So if I died, they knew what to do. It never really came to that because the command net never really told us what to do. We did hear about your guy who was like, I'm in this building, I'm going to the next building, and that was literally what he would radio.
We heard one man's adventure all day as he went through.
Well, he was narrating the whole time.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. It was great communication if he had been in a fire team and not on the command net.
Right. He's like, there's guys by that tree.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I presume there was only one tree then. Is that right?
Oh, no. There were plenty of trees, but I mean, most
and that's where you
run
into the limitations of trying to impose that level of organization so ad hoc, where, you've just got people then who are like, what normally would be very critical cogs in that kind of machine, who have never done this before.
Yeah.
and it ultimately winds up where literally, like, I wasn't even getting anything useful on the command net. So I just spent most of the day using it as like, okay, well, if there's a ceasefire, I'll echo it through that. And that'll be how I let people know the game's over. Because like it was impossible to get a hold of people otherwise.
Yeah, it was pretty hard.
Chaz, were you rolling with Sam all day and just listening to the command net kerfuffle through his loudspeaker?
Yeah, I mean,
we would many times turn it off.
We stayed. Yeah, it got pointless at a.
But I will say our our squad comms were great, I thought.
Yeah.
It'd have been nice if Matt had been a little more functional and Cesius had ever turned on his radio in a functional way. But
he bent his antenna.
yeah,
Yeah.
the three
the
of us
first
that
day-
were on were really, really solid, I thought, and did it at the right level.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And
So
after
did
my,
you-
my
Go ahead, Matt.
after my radio went down the first day, because I'll admit, like, I was exchanging fire on a hill and I roll on my back and suddenly through my earpiece I hear buttons unlocked. I'm like, oh no. And about 2 seconds later, I hear the local weather, and that was the end of comms for me for that day.
Nice. Yeah. So were you playing together like on the same squad during the day, Matt, Chaz, and Sam? So I'm curious because I mean, you had never, well, like I was saying at the start, like Chaz and Sam, you guys have played together, of course, in the past, but so you guys met through the Discord, right? Which is still really, it's amazing, but I can't believe it. But that's beside the point. How was that? Like, how was it in terms of preparing together remotely for an event like that, and then hitting the field with someone who you'd never played before? Like, how did y'all sort of interact on the day of?
I think Matt asked me, he's like, "What are you guys wearing?" And we're like, "Green." Okay, cool. And that was the end of it.
Yeah, that was our preparation. I'm like, yeah, are you guys staying at a place? And they're like, yeah, we're doing a Verbo. I'm like, I'm in. Dope.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it was pretty funny about the Verbo is, so I told my wife, I was like, yeah, we all know each other. Well, except for the one guy we met on the internet. And she was like, what? What are you doing? You're staying in a house with some dude on the internet. And then not long after we all got together at the house, Matt was like, yeah, my wife was really freaked out about me staying with people from the internet. I was like, okay, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, really, hey?
The equal level of fear from each other.
It turned out to be a great weekend. I think we all bonded so well. It was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, like we had really enjoyed our time there. I think I enjoyed, like, we had dinner each night together, and I really enjoyed that. That was great. We had drinks.
Yeah, the dinners were nice.
I didn't really get to hang out with you guys too much. Sadly,
well, you're an officer shouldn't. Right, you need to hold yourself above. You
gotta hold yourself above, and
yeah,
really,
your management, Eric.
Really iron out your brevity terms for the command net. Yeah, that's what you really need to focus on.
Wow.
If you,
I tried to tell people that if it didn't fit in a tweet, they shouldn't send it, and no one listened.
That's the best. Oh my god!
That's the best thing I've ever heard about a radio transmission. That's amazing.
Yeah. If it doesn't fit in a tweet, don't send it. But seriously, that one guy was living his best life on the radio, on the command net. Actually, Matt fit in with our play style really, really well. Like, we didn't even really have to talk about it that much. And we, let's be honest, guys, we kind of had the older, mature, thinking squad. We had like one 22-year-old or whatever he is, Marine, but he's used to working with a group in the Marines.
Yeah, no. He was just like, oh, it's a squad. Let's go.
Yeah, he's like, it's a squad. We know what to do. Great comms, both verbal, hand signals, even when we needed to use them, and on the radios. Really, really made the event for me. Like, our little group, the way we always, when one of us was dead, we'd go back to base and communicate and collect back up. We did lose Matt on Sunday. Sorry, Matt.
Damn.
And
Sunday
then
was a little bit more hectic.
Rip.
And we lost Ryan, so the squad was a little smaller, so it was a lot easier to get lost somehow.
Yeah.
I've heard that happen, just out of curiosity, at other events where, like, on the second day, people don't really show up. Is that something that happened at this event, or was it different?
To an extent.
Oh yeah, I'd say we have like maybe 2/3 the second day. If that.
It was a late arriving crowd for sure.
Yeah, everybody
partying on Saturday
showed
night
up
then, is it?
just barely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a lot more. I would say both like silly on Sunday, but also like a lot more brutal, because they pared it down to 3 capture points instead of 2, and there was a straight line of like machine guns and DMRs, and it was nasty, and there was a space in between you.
And that was the game where literally I was just like, okay, Washington Street, that's our firing line. Just go there and don't let them move past it, because all of the objectives were like 100 yards behind Washington Street.
Okay.
I didn't even know they had names.
Yeah, we missed that order. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was like passing it around as I could and telling people it's just like, there was so much going on that, you're trying to manage how many people and like you're trying to work within how many groups. That whole thing was
It's so interesting because you think a lot about how like you see that in war movies all the time. Like, oh, communication lines are down and stuff like that. And like lines don't need to be down. People just don't communicate, like period. Yeah. Right. So like you have all the tools at your disposal and it's still a complete nightmare. So yeah, it's really interesting. Like from that standpoint, like as an event organizer, that is also not just like as a commander, but also trying to run an event like that. That must be something that when you're thinking about how you're trying to structure your day is a hurdle for you, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, you're always trying to figure out how to control the flow of information. And, that's why we have a fully staffed chain of command for like our games that we run. And that's why like Milsim West has the same thing. Because otherwise you're trying to rely on people who you don't know their level of experience. You haven't vetted for them at all. And you don't know like who's good at what and how much on the same page or what the SOPs are. So that's when like trying to impose that level of structure and trying to manage that, it turns into like a very big challenge. So it's, I think, overall we had enough of a cohesive unit that we were able to, I mean, we played really, really well as like a whole team, like generally.
Well, you had these 3 clowns, so you're already pretty good.
Yeah. And those 3 clowns, like then were responsible for helping to organize like 40 to 60 of the people that were there. And so if you just have 3 clowns who could be trusted with 40 to 60 and you have that like 4 times over, you have most of the team.
Yeah, I gotta say,
I was going to say a full circus, but yeah.
for being a full circus, as we discussed earlier, almost everybody's willing. If you're like, hey, you and you want to go squad up and just let's go take the point real quick. Like almost any would be like, yeah, let's do it. I'm going with you right now.
Yeah.
All you have to do is keep people motivated.
I have to say, I really enjoyed the player base. Everywhere I went, everybody on both sides, alive, dead, or otherwise, super good natured, and I'd roll up to 3 guys huddled down behind cover, and I'd be like, "Hey, what do you see? What are we doing?" And they'd just tell me the whole situation, and we'd come up with a plan and move on it, right? So, and it didn't matter who they were. It was really that part of it was really enjoyable.
Yeah, it was awesome. Like I ended up clearing house with 2 of the wizards, and then like a dude with a saw, and then like 3 dudes with MP5s. And I'm like, where did all of you even come from? And they're like, we're going, guy, let's go. And I'm like, cool.
Sam and I, was it the first day or the second day, Sam, where it was like us and we were pushing through a house and going from house to house and getting closer and closer to the capture point. But there were just the 2 of us and we just kept pushing toward it. And then suddenly there was another
bunch of guys infill,
and then another guy and another guy. And suddenly we had a squad, but then, so we pushed. We got to the capture point. We took the point, and then we knew we needed to push one more house or one across the street just to push them back and keep them away from it. Because you don't really control the point. You control the area in front of the point is your best defense of it. And so we were doing that, and then all of a sudden, Sam gets hit or I got hit, and we had to return to the fob. But as we were leaving, the infill behind us just kept surging, and it just felt like this thing that I can't say that we started it, but it felt good to walk away from it because we knew we were leaving it in really good hands.
Well, yeah, I mean, we made. Yeah. You can say all day that we didn't start it, but we did because we were at the very point of that left, and we were putting fire on the very first elements of them at the very beginning of the day, and then they held through the day as we, like you said, when we saw more people pulling into where we were. When I died, I saw 2 guys take my spot. It was great.
Yeah, it's interesting really because Eric said, like it's all about keeping the player motivated, which I definitely agree. But I think there's also a part there around showing by example, right? So it's not just about motivating them, but it's like, hey, we did this thing and you can do this thing too. And especially for those airsofters that maybe don't have the same level of confidence in their personal skills or what have you, they're going like, oh, they did that. Okay, I'll follow suit. And to your point, Chaz, like once you leave because you get hit or whatever, you're like, okay, well, it's much better in much better shape than it was when we got here, so we can feel comfortable that we're leaving it in good hands. We can go do something else. But I'm curious, like huge event like that, players of all kinds, whether you're talking about guys doing milsim, LARP, every point in between. What did you think of the overall, like I would say, average player skill level? Was it sort of about what you expected, or better overall? Because we harp a lot on the channel about doing your ready ups and working on your personal skills and stuff like that. Clearly, most of these people aren't watching our channel, and that's fine. But like,
not yet.
How did? Well, they should. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying so. But like, what did you find that player skill level like? And should people really be doing more ready ups? Ultimately, is where I'm getting at.
Dude, I would say it was like the caliber of player was definitely a step above your weekend skirmish. Like anybody who was dedicated enough to come out to this, like even I met a few dudes who was like their very first thing, but they were ready and good to go. And like they were a step above your average. Let's go do this on a crazy weekend renter. Right. Like it was
right
at the very, like the worst player I met out there was like middling on an average skirmish.
There were a couple guys that I ran into that I had to, explain how to weave Molly. I mean,
yeah, like, dude, that's just a thing, bro. This is the Molly to weave. Is my point, right?
It just seems like there was that, but there were a couple young guys there. That point at which, and it was. I watched the video today. Matt goes around this corner. Him and I, we got separated. I think Sam and the other guys were to our right, and of course we were going left as the squad would do. Go left or
go left.
And so we did. Matt steps out and does this great. I said to him, "What do you see?" And all of a sudden Matt goes, "Oh," and just falls back on the ground, just bam on the deck. And I'm like, "Okay."
I turned around the corner. And there was a sniper. All right.
Yeah.
And as I went to draw on him, I got to hear on him. And then I saw the BB. I'm like, oh. And it went pop. And I went, ah.
And I captured it all on video. It was actually pretty funny because I said, "Oh, that's what you see." And he flops down. And so I'm like, well, don't do what he just did because I'll end up the same. And then it turns into this bizarre thing where this guy comes out, and the wind that morning was fairly horrendous. It was blowing from the west, and I was kind of angling west northwest, and this guy is about 150 feet away, well within the range of my gun, and I know I'm well within the range of his gun, and we're shooting at each other and nobody's hitting each other.
No amount of skill is going to fix that wind.
Well, yeah,
sounds like Newfoundland.
It was pretty rough. It was pretty rough. And then the guy starts doing this. He's like, I was putting him close, but he starts like he's dancing and he's shaking his butt, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's on. And so if he was here, I shot here, and eventually he goes and raises his hand and pulls his dead rag up, and I lost it. I just
awesome.
And then I congratulated him and gave him the thumbs up for it. But it was fun. So the player's skill level was there. In that same moment, there was another two kids we were with, and I could tell they were younger. Not, maybe this was their first milsim experience. And I knew Matt had just got shot, and I knew I was going to try to figure out what was going on around the corner of the building. And so I told one of them to get back into the corner. There was this juniper bush thing, and he was just wearing olive drab, just green. And I was like, you with the AK, stuff yourself into this corner, because if I die and they come around the corner, you're going to hose them all down. Like, you're my backup. You're going to take care of this. And he did it. He shoved himself back there. And it was fine. And he stayed there and held the position until it was obvious. And then some more guys came around the corner and they just lit me up. So yeah, I think the player level was pretty good overall.
I did clue somebody into the modern invention that is a hop up.
Oh wow! Okay.
Okay.
There was a guy we were standing.
Shh, that's a secret.
we're standing there before the game started on Sunday, and he's like, "Yeah, my gun's not shooting that well." And I pick it up, and the BBs are just dropping, and I just turned up his hop up, and he must have been shooting like .2s or something because his range was still, in my regard, pretty pitiful. But I got it to where it was at least doing something, and I handed it back to him, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!"
He was totally blown away.
Wow.
Now, I want
Go
to tell
kill some people, buddy. Go kill some people.
Yeah, really.
Oh, he was phenomenal. My point of view from Chaz's story after I fell is I watched him. I turned over after I fell, right? Like, because dude shot me in the forehead. And I watched Chaz shoving this kid. And I mean, he was like this tall. I mean, he grabs this olive drab kid and just, get in there. And this kid has an RPK, right? And I'm like, you know what? Do it. And he disappears. And I just barely see the barrel. And like, fantastic juniper bush and everything. And I see Chaz go, he used his other buddy too. Like Chaz is underplaying it. He grabbed the other guy and he's like, now go out this way. And he like did a beautiful maneuver with him. It was just unlucky. Like the guys came around at the wrong moment. No, he was using his assets. He turned those two dudes who no experience, obviously, into effective fighters just by being like, hey guys, come on.
Good guy Chaz shoving kids around the airsoft field.
Well, and that was the whole thing I was really trying to focus on, like in the lead up to the event, like in the Discord and in like talking to players. You know, my goal, because the player's skill level is all over the place, right? Like you've got 850 players for, I would say it's a parabola, right? Like on average, you probably had a pretty average to high average level player. And then you had like your spread of guys who were on the lower end of your spread of guys who were on the higher end. Like, you know, there was a good number of people I see at like a lot of Milsim West games and know they're really good at airsoft there. But you have that spread and you don't know who is in that spread. So the better way to flatten that spread a little bit is just be like, hey, you guys who know what you're doing, like just go work with the people who don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly
like,
right.
You're not, you and your guys, like I think I said like right before the day, I'm like, none of your groups are badass enough to take on 400 people by yourself. Like, none of you are that cool. You're not John Wick. So, so then I was just telling these guys like, hey, let's just work with everybody. I think like, you know, obviously the more experienced players, that's review. Like they know that. But the guys who are not as experienced and maybe aren't in that mindset, they hear that type of thing and like, oh yeah, well let's give that a shot.
Yeah, well, you know, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I think you're totally right. Like it's a team game, and like yes, the game is 850 attendees, but whether it's 85 and it's 40 aside, or whether it's 850 and 400 aside, like you can be a great team, but like you can't take on a force that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times your size. It's just not. Well, you might think you can, right?
You might be able to for a bit.
Yeah, exactly. But like ultimately, like you really need to collaborate, right? And to your point, like if you take the people who you're like, okay, you guys, you're hot shit. You guys are soup sandwiches. We're gonna put you together, and that way you're sort of like bringing everything sort of back on the level, or at least a little bit. And it certainly sounds like that sounded like the kind of environment where that type of interaction is sought after. Yes. Right, not just by the rock stars who are really trying to help the team, but also by the people who are there who know they're soup sandwiches, who are like, yes, please help me. Right?
They're like, oh, this is my first game. I need direction. Okay, yeah, here's some direction.
And we talked about the costuming and the openness of that. I actually think that really helps it. So everybody sees everybody wearing goofy stuff and kind of relaxed. And I mean, I had a lot of what appeared to be very green, first big event players. When I got dubbed as, section 1 go left, they just came up to me and they're like, what do you want me to do? And I was like, you guys just stay with us. We're going to go to the objective. We're going to do this thing. And I had actually a pretty young kid who like kind of self-designed himself my bodyguard. And I clued into what he was doing. He was just staying real close to me. And I actually was like, hey, you're on me, come with me. And so when we got up to a ford, we got way ahead of our big body of guys because Chaz and our crew really took going left to heart. And I ended up, trying to go straight for the objective. And I ended up with just this guy. And I was like, hey, you stay on me, cover me, look in all the directions. And I'm going to try to take a few steps back and see what our crew is doing. And Kiddo just did it. I mean, he just went for it. We both died. But I mean, and we walked back to Fob and we talked and stuff and we respawned together and I was like, hey, we're gonna go join back up. Let's do this again. I really thought it was awesome that that some of the newer people were willing to be open to the idea of taking orders. And then I never saw anybody talk down to anybody or heard any negativity
No.
at
No.
all.
That's awesome.
I had great,
Yeah.
and everywhere I went, I'd like I said, just show up with randos and be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they just tell me like we were old buddies, you know.
Yeah.
Really, that vibe of the event was, I'd say, the pleasant surprise for me because as a guy coming from Colorado, pretty small airsoft community.
Mhm.
California kind of, maybe I just built it in my own head. I had a reputation of like probably some people that could be real jerks when they want to be, and I encountered none of that on either side of the event.
That's awesome. And I think about that kid too, and his perspective. I had this conversation with Jimmy from Nomad because he was saying like he was in the military, but like he was just like he did 3 years or whatever. He didn't do any of the cool guy stuff or whatever. But I'm like, when you run into a piece of cover and grab some random airsofter who has a machine gun and you're like, hey, we're gonna machine gun together, I need you to lay down like a sector or whatever, and that person is like, this is the greatest thing I've ever experienced in my life, right? Some army guy who is like super legit, even though he doesn't think he's legit. In my eyes, he's super legit. And so this kid in this scenario is like, wow, I was rolling with this huge celebrity Sam. He's been on Call Your Hits 3 times. And like I was his bodyguard all day and we did all this work. And like, all joking aside, from his perspective, he's like, that might be the coolest thing he's ever done.
Yeah.
Right. And to you, it's like, oh yeah, that was fun. It was neat or whatever. But to them, that's like, it's almost a formative moment in their time playing airsoft, which is super, super cool.
Real quick, I would also not diminish the effect that has on like you having that moment as well. Like you've got you've got that kid with you and you remember that moment. You think like, oh, that was really cool that we got to play together. And stacking those bricks builds the wall upon which the beautiful mural of airsoft rests, right?
Like obviously that one moment with those two new kids made an impression on not just Chaz, but me. And I was dead at the time watching him do this. And I'm like, this is awesome. Lying there as a corpse. I'm like, this is the best moment of airsoft.
Like that's the reason we do this is to connect
I was
with
just
people.
Gonna say that. Isn't that not why we do this? Like, getting kills and stuff is all fine, but I think, at least for me, I can speak for myself later in my, as I get on in age, let's call it. Like, yeah, getting kills is great, but like those moments are way more impactful for me. Like that's what I carry with me, right? So that's really, really cool. I'm curious, like, what are some other standout moments for you guys? Like when you think back to this event in particular, and maybe we can start with Eric, like, especially from your point of view as a commander, like when you think back to BFLA 5, like,
oh god,
what's the standout for you?
It's not related to the game at all. If you want one related to the game, I can give you one of those. But the one not related to the game is riding around all weekend with Spencer and Sean, just listening to different black metal bands, some of which I'd heard of and some of which I hadn't. And I literally have a list in my phone now of just all these black metal bands I have to check out.
Nice. That's hilarious. What about you, Chaz? What's the thing you're going to carry from BFLA as you think back on it?
I think the camaraderie, making friends with somebody you made on the internet, that was, the game was fun. It was hilarious, and it was, dangerous to be in those buildings. Every nail in the place was pointed up. Ready to step on it. But the dinners we had, those 2 nights, Friday night and then Saturday night, those were fun. Those were, I think, as fun to me as the game was. And meeting Matt and actually hanging out and talking to Cesius, our 22-year-old Marine. He's from Colorado. He's now out in Pendleton or somewhere like that. But we don't get to see him much anymore. But actually, just chatting with him, he's younger than my son, so.
Seriously, dinner both nights, top notch. Like nothing, really fancy, but that was the cherry on top of the weekend for me.
It was and they were just right. Like we didn't even have a disappointing meal. It was so nice. And like even the next morning, like the highlight for me of the Verbo gang was like when we were all getting ready in the morning and all checking our gear, and I'm like, this is so cool. Like all my buddies around me, I'm like, oh, Chas needs this fucking this oh, excuse me. Chas needs this pouch that I have, right? Or like, oh, Steve needs a battery. I brought extra LiPo batteries just in case.
Yeah.
It was so great. And they're like squatting up in the morning, just working on our stuff together. It was great.
So Steve, he's actually really good friends with oh dang it, I forgot his name. The guy that owns Balahek Airsoft.
Swamp Sniper?
Yeah, he's legitimate. He used to work there, and he's really good friends with him. He's like, oh yeah, we were just texting, just this morning.
Awesome.
And he learned. Sam and I are deep into teching our guns. Like they're all fixed.
Yeah.
Steve is not.
But,
I don't believe you. Continue.
No, that's actually a mural back there. But we're, nothing has been left untouched. Not Sam, but Steve, on the other hand, learned this from Swamp Sniper in that you don't touch the gun. You don't let the magic fairy dust out of it. You can change stuff on the outside. He hasn't even changed the bucking in this gun.
Wow.
He buys an expensive gun and he uses it and uses it and uses it.
Same thing I do.
And so he's continuously giving me crap because my MP5K that I built specifically to do this role of being able to slam a 1,500 round mag on the bottom of it and just hose people down indoors full auto, which I never get to do that. I never get to wear the
class rules.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was going to be an overpowered gun. That was, and I fell victim to other people running that gun, but
yes,
and then the darn thing just went right after the first engagement. Guy comes around the corner, I go to pull it, and it's like nothing, dead.
Oh my god.
Yeah, super sad. There's no fixing a gun at that stage.
Yeah, really.
So just go back and change it. But just dealing with, and then Steve giving me crap about the whole thing.
They're like an old married couple, those two.
Yeah. That's the sense I'm getting. Yeah.
We drove. Yeah, it was slightly less than 2,000 miles.
Which is funny, by the way, because you can't tell, but Chaz is a taller dude and Steve's like yay big.
Oh yeah,
and they go together around together like
Mutt and Jeff
robots from Portal.
That's so funny.
It's pretty funny. I mean, him and I get along great, but he's just giving me so much crap about. It's like that's why you don't open up the gun. That's why and he learned that from Swamp Sniper. But
the thing I got to say about Steve is he's by far our most tactful. I can't say it. Most thinking guy out there. Like we're like out there. We're in the middle of a firefight, and we're like, Steve, we're gonna go flank him left, and he's like, why? And I was like, well, to flank him left. He goes, but to what end? And I was like, and he's like, he was like, if you stay here, you hold this position, they can't ever get this control point. So just stay here, stay safe, and shoot at them. And I was like, well, that's no fun. we could
he was right,
Steve. Though. He was totally right. And he was like, you don't know what's over there. There could be 100 guys around that corner. You don't know. And I was like, dang it, Steve, talking the sense, making me stop.
And then, that's actually how I got separated the second day. As I was hanging out with Steve, and he's like, we're just going to hold this point. And I'm like, bro, I know that you like to bunt all day, but sometimes I want to swing for the fences.
Yeah.
Same thing on Sunday. I'm like in this building. I was like, oh, they're in that next building. We got to get in that building. And he's like, why? We just shoot at them and hold them there. And I was like, Steve, I'm going to go get in that building. And he goes, frontal attack on an entrenched enemy, it's 75% losses. I then proceeded to prove him absolutely correct. 100%.
Yeah, of course you did. Of course you did.
I remember that assault. I died twice.
Second part of the day when we switched spawn points with the other team.
And then
Steve was the only one to get out alive. of the building. There was a building across the
Hey, you guys flanked left that second game, but the left side from that perspective was different from the left side of the other perspective.
That's how we saw the whole map, is we literally flanked left in a full circle.
Yeah.
Just two-story buildings.
That was my logic of like, I can keep the sections, areas of responsibility the same, because that technically with the spawn moves, it's a new area.
It was totally new. We found new ways to die.
I can't complain because that's how we saw the whole AO. I saw every inch of it as we spiraled around it to the left.
Yeah.
So, Eric, I know you shared your favorite memory about driving around listening to the Black Metal and the Emperor and whatever else, other black metal bands I'm not familiar with.
Sky Eater is Spencer's band. Shout out Spencer's band, Sky Eater. They're really, really good if you're into like ethereal, cosmic sounding black and doom metal.
I will add it to the list, Sky Eater. But that being said, so let's focus on the old Plasto Blasto as it is.
Sorry.
But what is thinking about like the actual airsoft gameplay for you?
Yeah.
What is the standout moment for you from BFLA?
I would say the standout for me at BFLA in terms of gameplay was probably the night game, because I ended up playing the entire night game, which is why I let Spencer get a lot of trigger time on Sunday, because I felt bad he didn't get to do anything at night. But I brought this couple of guys out, and the night game had like a lot less players than the day game. So a lot of the field ended up feeling pretty empty. And I just bring these couple of guys, and we go for the leftmost control point, and we just sit on it. And I just go around to these guys. I'm like, all right, we're going to set up in the second story of these buildings just inside the control point with fire facing down. And when they come to capture it, it's going to be a kill box. It's going to be awesome. And we proceeded to sit there for the first 15 minutes with no sign of anybody coming for us, period, at all. And it was coming into the last hour of the game. So I said to all the guys there, I'm like, hey, man, I know there's like an actual gunfight going on somewhere near the middle. So if you want to like go to that and have fun for the last hour, go do that. So two of the guys left, and one of them was just like, I don't have nods or anything. I'll stay with you. I have my night vision. I have my PVS 14. So we're like, okay, cool. So we set up in this apartment on a second story. I've got windows facing one way, and I've got the stairwell to my rear that you can't see me from, but I would hear anyone coming up it. And then this other guy is facing, a whole other area of approach and direction, and I could like call him out and get him there and just turn the courtyard into a kill box if someone tried to come for the point. And we proceeded to sit there 45 minutes and saw nobody. And it was just like my favorite moment, because I was literally like watching out. I had just barely poked my head up above this windowsill, and I'm just looking at, like, I could see people approaching. I could see IR light in buildings. I'm watching people move tactically, like, toward the point, and I'm like, they're gonna find it any minute now. They're gonna find it. They're gonna end up in this courtyard, and we're gonna shoot them. And then it came to 15 minutes left of the game, and nobody had found it. And I can only guess that, like, they weren't on the apps. They didn't know where the objectives were.
Oh.
So maybe they like just didn't even realize they had walked right by something they were supposed to take. But then me and the guy who were there, eventually with 15 minutes left of the game, were like, all right, well, we're just gonna walk around. And the place was empty. Everybody had walked off. Me and this guy, along with like two other people, were the last people on the field.
Did you?
Nice. And you made a friend for life.
What's that?
Did you fire a BB at all?
During the night game, I did some shooting for the first bit of it. I went out and I did a movement, and I like fought in the center for a bit. I was trying my hand at passive aiming to support white light, but I wound up just using primarily white light when I actually got into engagements. So I got a few kills during the night game during like the first half. It was the second half where that all went down.
Where you found the perfect position.
Yeah. Hey, we won the night game because like TSS just didn't have the objectives, I guess. So and they all just left. So
we chose not to play the night game for fear of stepping on every nail that was pointing upward, and the copious amount of manhole covers that were removed.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Hey.
Oh, I was walking off the field the second day. I'm like, I'm not gonna play the night game, and I almost stepped in a manhole. I'm like, nope, certainly not.
Yeah, definitely.
Dinner was better than the ER.
It was good.
Yeah,
Dinner was
definitely.
really
Luckily,
good.
there was a lot of moonlight, so like you really didn't even need night vision to navigate the outside portions.
Every time we do
Yeah.
these mill sims, I'm always like, oh man, I'm so looking forward to that night game. And then every time the sun starts going down, I'm like, huh, so dinner then.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's
Like, not
the
that
way
we
it
didn't
goes.
pack fieldable dinners, right? Like, we all had
Yeah.
Yeah.
snacks and food. We could have,
And there were the food trucks.
Yeah.
we
And
could
the
have stopped at a food truck,
trucks, yeah.
or we ended up going to Pancho Villa's and having some steaks and shrimp, and it was delicious, and we had some beers.
See,
They
that
had a-
sounds way better. That
It was
sounds way
great.
better. I remember many years ago, we tried to do an overnight game here in Newfoundland, and at the time, like night vision is still prohibitively expensive in Canada, but at the time like you just could not get it, even if you had the money, you just couldn't get it. And but we're like, no, we're gonna do it anyway. Flashlights, white light, etc. And like we're on the field, we're like, yeah, we're having a great game, and it's dusk, and we're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And then the sun actually set, and it's like, wow, it is really dark out here. Like, it's super dark.
Yeah.
And then we're basically like in the woods in basically pitch darkness. We're like, I don't think this is going to happen, because if you've heard me talk about like our old field we used to play, Red Cliff, it's an old rundown USAF radar site, and that's full of like exposed manhole covers, small holes, rebar, glass, tiles, basically anything that's that wasn't nailed down that you got knocked over. So I definitely appreciate the appeal of being like, so maybe because that's what we ended up doing. We're like, so are we doing a campfire and then dinner then, guys? It's like, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's go. So yeah, I can appreciate that. One of the things I was curious about too, this event, we already mentioned the airsoft celebrity that is Sam. We've also, of course, got Eric here, who runs a YouTube channel.
I'm so
and
famous.
The event is run by Jet Desert Fox, right? Which most airsofters who are listening to this would know, even if they don't follow his content, they would know who Jet is, right? And so we talked as well in the past about how having, quote unquote airsoft celebrities or, more famous players at those types of event can sometimes disrupt the flow in some ways. Like, they get special missions and then they just do a bit of an engagement and then just leave or whatever else. So I was just curious from your perspectives, and as well from your perspective, Eric, as the ERT commander, like, were there other well-known players hitting the field that were taking part in the action, so to speak, and how did the game flow as a result?
The celebrities, because I honestly did not recognize anybody, because the only YouTube airsoft channel I watch is Storm Riders.
My man.
But as we're walking around,
Wow.
Chaz is like, hey, that's Dutch the Hooligan. Hey, that's that guy. And I'm like, hey, neat. Okay. But they were just like in the squads with regular dudes doing regular stuff. The only celebrity who was doing anything was Jet himself, because he was running the event. I saw him and driving around his Tacoma, making sure everything was great.
So I had two interactions with celebrities. So Jet, here it is, lunchtime. We're all back at the parking lot. We're feeding our faces, and here comes Jet in his Tacoma, pulls up to the trash bin, pulls the trash out of the thing, wraps it all up, throws it in the back of the truck, and I'm like, thanks, Jet. That was because trash was overflowing, and he backs up and he leans out and he goes, if I don't do it now, the city of Victorville is going to call me up and they're going to make me come and do this. He was literally emptying trash. He wasn't slaying anybody. He did not work, he didn't have a gun all weekend. Now, his wife, Leah, she was out there running around. My buddy Steve knows her, and they started chit-chatting. Very nice lady. And then for lunch, before we got back to lunch and seeing Jet emptying trash, we go back to grab our fob bags to head back, and we're walking back towards the parking lot, and this guy comes up, and very tall dude, and kit that I've maybe recognized, I'm not sure, but then he turns around and it just says Dutch the Hooligan on his back, and I'm like, hey, are you Dutch? And he turns around and he's like, yeah, in that voice, of course he's always got his face covered. It's like nobody knows what this guy actually looks like. But
I'll sell the knowledge for $100.
Yeah.
or
One,
bottles of
one,
whiskey,
that cheap,
whichever comes
huh? Every
first.
man has his price, I guess.
Yeah,
Exactly.
well, my knowledge is literally just gonna be me reciting it from memory. So take that for what it's worth, because I was.
He has a mustache.
So he was he was a nice guy. He's basically the way he is on his videos seemed to be the way he was. We just tried to chatted. He last summer he came through. He kind of just swept from California across the country, just playing different fields, and he stopped at 2 fields in Colorado, and we had a conversation about that. The first place I ever played Airsoft.
I played with him the day that he was at one of our local fields.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, he was super low key. Definitely like into and engaged with all the 10-year-olds or whatever at the field, that were just like mobbed him,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? Yeah, he seemed like a pretty good guy. I didn't see him at this
It was
event
the
at all.
10-year-olds and me.
Yeah, that's right.
Chaz is starstruck.
And different experience for you too, Eric, I guess, from the standpoint of you being the person that people will or may recognize, right?
Well, I mean, I guess so. Yeah, there was an average number of people. I would say, like, I go to a lot of events, and at a lot of those events, I've got like a pretty decent number of people who recognize me. But I think it's like I've also tried never to make it like a weird like fan things. I'm like, I just make videos about a hobby I like. This is nothing special. Any of you could do this.
Legit, 100%. Yeah, look at me, right?
Literally, like anyone can do this, so I don't feel like I do anything special. So I just had very chill, very good interactions with a lot of people, and even the people who like didn't know me, they were like, "Oh, well, you're the ERT commander, and like you're a point of contact as like a customer service rep, and what's going on with the game, and how does the app work?" And no, literally, like that was the kind of work I was there to do. Like, that I think is why the Desert Fox model is to try to find, influencers is the industry word, if you want to use that word. And you just try to find those people who have enough social skills that they can really like transition that role of having the support of an experienced like Milsim West cadre or military member to then try to do all of the organization with players. And that was the side of it that I really got to see a lot of. But then in terms of like who else was there, like Dayton from House Gamers was there. He was running an RCXD. So he had like a little mini RC tank called Bubbles.
Oh, I got shot by that
out
thing.
there.
Yeah.
He was on our team.
Well, he was playing around with it, and he was, and somebody said, "Shoot that guy," and then I proceeded to get shot, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know that I really consented to that, but okay." I was already dead.
Go ahead, Sam. I actually walked right in between. So Dutch the Hooligan, the House Gamers guy, and Airsoft Alphonse, and didn't even recognize any of them. I looked at the video later, and I'm like, that's Alphonse, that's Dutch, and the guy from with the little remote control car.
Yeah, Dayton.
And I just said, "Oh, that's cool," and just walked right in between the middle of them.
Well, so the goal for Desert Fox events, I think, as much as anything, is to be like an airsoft con as well, like to have like that draw as well of being like, yeah, there's like a game going on and everything, but there's also the camping out and the Friday portion, and like you're playing with all these like content creators and notable people. Like it really is trying to appeal to like the con crowd, I think, in a way, and model that style of game. And I think that's a pretty good idea, especially when I think the games can be run pretty good when you have all the right people in place. And we're lucky that Leah was like kind of just a player. I don't want to say that like, oh, she was just a player, like, oh, how dare you just play airsoft, but she wasn't like doing admin stuff other than cleaning up garbage and like doing with check-in and setup and everything. So she was still but that's the role that you have to find for all the different people you're gonna bring in as well, of like, okay, if you're going to have like influencers out, they also have to add value to the game. And that's the balance that I think Josh, Brian, and Jet really focus on, of like, hey, just making sure that everyone we bring out is going to, know what the job is and be able to do the job, or at least like create major enough content that it's actually going to be worth, like, if we gave them a free ticket.
I think
I was going to say
that I think that's a fair statement, because there were people wearing stuff that I've never seen on an airsoft field, even on a pickup game before. It was almost towards a LARP, but the idea of like a con kind of event, where people dress up and, I mean, I don't know anybody that would ever make an N7 suit or, or a Warhammer 40K, I like and do that.
Yeah, what kind of loser would do that? Am I right?
So fun fact, I'm only going to mention this because Jet mentions it in the video that I filmed with him after the game. But they are looking at a power armor class.
Oh, wow.
So while we're discussing this, I actually, because of the con atmosphere here, I'm rebuilding my Mandalorian with only black and green parts.
Nice.
Taking all the tan out of it. Because
Let's
unlike
go.
some people, I'm not going to wear a multicam plate carrier and then act confused when my own team shoots me, Sam.
Hey,
Sorry, Matt, actually,
that was khaki, and I only died from friendly fire one time.
Amazing.
I apologize, Matt, because I said let's go, and I should have said this is the way. I do apologize. I did want to say, though, I think, there's something to be said about, Eric mentioned about airsoft influencers like adding value, and I come back to Matt's point that he said that you don't watch any other content than our content, which let's assume that that's not hyperbole for a second. The fact that you're hitting the field with all these other influencers and you don't necessarily realize that they're influencers tells you exactly that they are adding value. They are participating in the same way that other players are participating too, right? Which
that's the hope,
is really cool, right?
Well, like the way I look at it is, yeah, absolutely, you are 100%. But this is now what I call the Storm Riders extended universe, right? Like, like BBs don't hit. I just want them to know, because they had you on the Nomad.
Yeah.
They're now part of the Storm Riders universe. They get my looks, and now I'll be following Desert Fox because of this event I had with my buddies that I didn't even consider before, right? But I had such a good time that now I want to see what other stuff he's up doing.
Can Chaz and I claim crossover status?
See,
because
no,
I think
we
we've been to the
like
most Storm Riders extended universe events.
Absolutely. Like, well, I see you guys. You guys are like the All-Star Justice League, right? And Golden Age.
You guys
and everything.
You
and
guys
then,
are
like,
too
I'm
much.
like,
this is wild.
I'll just run by like Barry Allen. I'll pop into your universe now and again because you guys are like Superman and Batman, right? And I'm like, man, look at the.
We're also the
Superman
actors that need the money, so we'll show up to any of the series, right?
Nice.
But then and then we have like our original universe, Phil Superman, right? Obviously, like the current super sexy Henry Cahill Superman, right? And then I look like Sam.
Okay, I'll take that. Okay, sure. Yeah, let's go.
The black and white Superman. All right, and Adam West. And it's this whole thing that I think about in my head when I'm listening to Storm Riders, right? And then we've got Eric, who's like Green Arrow, just like chilling off in his own universe. But he comes around now and then.
I do what I can.
There's one other question that, this one hits home for me in particular. And the reason is, of course, in Newfoundland, we have a very small airsoft community by comparison to some of the other centers and so on, right? And there is a tendency in areas that have a smaller play area, like mine and like other parts of the world as well, to look at events like this and go, especially of this scale, right, with this many players, that is the best kind of airsoft event. This is the type of event that all airsoft events should aspire to be. And basically, if your event is not like this, if your community can't host events that have like hundreds and hundreds of players, then your community is trash. This is where this needs to be, right?
I have opinions on this.
Like, the thing about this, and this is where I want to say, is like, you guys have experienced both ends of this spectrum of going to these huge games, but also having smaller games that are perhaps different. And that's the question that I have for you. So what, on the one hand, like, in what ways did you find like a game of this stature of BFLA to be super, super enjoyable and very different? But in what other ways do you find smaller events, your community events, more enjoyable than what you experienced at BFLA?
Well, this is a special occasion, right? Like, normally when I've gone to bigger events, twice, right? Galactic Civil War and then just Antioch, GamePod Outpost, EVIC, which, by the way, I thought it was Evike. That's weird.
Me too.
It is weird, but it is Evic.
But besides that, I've never been to like a really big thing, and I've played airsoft for 5 years now, perfectly happily in my hobby, every weekend going to the 3 fields within a certain distance of me and playing all that stuff and being perfectly happy with that. And this was just like that, but it was on a bigger scale. Yes, it was big, huge, 850 people as compared to my local 80 every weekend, right? But it was the same layout of people. It was the same feeling of camaraderie. It was just in a bigger, big way. Like, it was longer than your weekend pickup game, but it had the same, it wasn't more valuable necessarily. It was great. We had an experience. It was awesome. I met some dudes. I met a whole lot of people I never would have seen. I ran in a huge field in a big circle. But ultimately, you can get that feeling on any airsoft field that you're willing to put in an effort with the other players and be like, hey, dudes, let's be friends and play in this way and work together. And like, that was the moment for me. Like you said, those moments we work for, right? There's nothing better in airsoft than turning around after you said, let's go, guys, and seeing 3 or 4 rentals charging up behind you and being like, yes, they did. Oh, they did it. And that's what it was like for me. It was just that on a huge scale. So no, like, my regular skirmish games are going to be just as fun every day. They were just as valuable. They're just as cool. But I'll admit that on these bigger scales, it feels more like those are practiced when I don't mess up my ready ups, my reloads, or my side transitions, right? Because I've been concentrating on them so much at my weekend skirmishes.
So, Eric, you have some opinions on this too?
Oh, well, my opinion is that, like, if you're purely evaluating game design and game experience, I've had proportionally probably more small games that were incredible than I've had big games that were incredible. This game I thought was incredible for a lot of the reasons that we laid out. And, like, honestly, getting to meet, like, you guys and, play with you guys, as limited as my time with you guys was in terms of trigger time, unfortunately. But just getting to meet and play with so many people that, like, I've only interacted with on the internet, or people that I don't get to see often enough, like, that was really special. But any game is only as special as the community that's there, right? Like, I've had games where we've had 50 to 100 people there that everyone was very tight-knit and everyone knew each other, and the game was absolutely incredible for that reason. And then you go to a game that's 850 people, and if the community there sucks, just having more people doesn't make it better. Mm-hmm. So, my opinion is that this whole game is only as good as the people you play it with and the attitudes that they all bring to the game. So when everyone brings a good attitude and is having a good time, the scale is just a different way to play the game.
Exactly. There's something that we there's a local field. It's a paintball field. It is, every day of the month except the last Saturday of the month. It's a paintball field, but then the last Saturday of the month, they always allow airsoft. And then sometimes they'll throw in, when we come off the field, a paintball group will go on. But it's always a small crowd. It's always a small group of people. And they're generally, teams that we know and we've played with at much larger events. And it's something that I've always thought, and we've always said amongst each other, it's not the size, because it may be 20 dudes, it may be 15. Last month it was 15 dudes. It was cold, but so we went out and we played, and it's not the size.
It's how you play with them.
It was the quality. Yeah,
literally.
I'm sorry I teed that up for you, man, but no, it's the quality of the people that go and the time you have with them, the fun. I mean, some of the best memories, that I can think of in small, just weekend games are at that field on those last Saturday of the month at this little field called Dynamic Paintball.
And we'll have weeks or months, sorry, I forget it's only monthly, where we'll know every single person's name, right? Yeah. So when you divvy up teams, you do it by name, and you just know who's on your team, it's that small, so it makes it better, and you're more willing to die when you know the guy who killed you.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
It's
so, and I think too, like, even if you have 400 people at a game or 800 people or whatever, how many of those people are you really playing with or even interacting with at any given time?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
I
faceless.
mean, I can tell you,
the other team is faceless.
I can speak from that. Like, I had to be the point of contact for over 400 people this weekend. Like, I feel like the whole weekend was a blur. Like, I interacted with so many people. Like, I feel like I felt rude because I was just beginning to forget like who I'd talked to before and like whatever. Like, it was, I felt very rude, but at the same time, like, God, I'm also like talking to 400 people, so this sucks.
Man.
Yeah, really.
That's only in your head. Every time I saw you, you were great.
You were great.
You did a stellar job.
I saw you check-in, going out of your way to greet new people and be like, "Wait, are you ERT? Wait, are you ERT? Come, be friends. Let's do stuff."
Well, and that's what I was trying to do. Is just by the end of it, it's like the social battery is like Monday. I was just sitting at Jet and Leah's house waiting for my flight, and I'm just like, we're just there watching The Expanse, and I'm just staring at the TV like, oh God, it feels so good that they don't want to talk right now either.
Yeah.
There was a moment where, you know, I had bust through this hobo hole. Like, there was literally somebody, I fell through this door and that somebody was actually living in this. I can't believe anyone would subject themselves on a daily to that environment, but
there's occasionally squatters there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
he literally found a whole hobo apartment. I saw it. I can second.
Wow.
I poked in. I was like, okay, that's weird, but pushed through. Somebody had brought in like tumbleweeds, huge tumbleweeds, to block entrance to this, and I had to just mash my way through it because bad dudes were on the other side of the building, and this was the only way to get to them. And I come out there and I shoot two guys, and there's Leah just sitting on the ground talking to a TSS player, TAN player, and they're just sitting there chit-chatting. And I come out and she looks at me and I see the TAN guy and he doesn't have a dead rag or anything on. Oh, by the way, totally going to be using the PT, the hyper high vis.
Yeah,
that is totally going to be my big takeaway from this game. That is now my dead rag. No more red. Dead rag. Nobody cannot see that
reflective
thing. The high vis is honestly like one of the best innovations Desert Fox Events has.
Yeah. I think he took that from Milsim West. I think that's
So Milsim West does not use dead rags, period. You lay on the ground when you're dead.
Thank God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being yelled at for a guy who's like, hey, you're putting him past my head. I'm like, well, you're dead. Maybe you should move.
Yeah.
That was my only bad interaction.
Oh, I was in a building one time with a couple of guys. Like, we got shot. We were pressed up into a room, and there was some angles, so we get hit. But there's people behind us who they're shooting at still. So our guys are still getting shot, and one of them like starts bitching, like, "Hey, I'm already dead." I literally just like grabbed him and his buddy, and I'm like, "Hey guys, there's people behind us. We're gonna move." And I just put us into another corner where like they could still see that we were dead on the other side, but we were out of the line of fire for our friendlies. So it was like, all right, cool. And we didn't get shot anymore. It was this crazy thing. When you get out of the way, you don't get shot anymore.
The guy,
miraculous.
He was yelling. Sam was in this room with me, and the guy is yelling at me, and he goes, "Is there somebody behind me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the guy I'm shooting at is behind you." And I was like, "Just move."
More than once, I had like a guy like there'd be two dudes in a doorway and you'd shoot one and he'd be like waving his dead rag as you're shooting at the other. I'm like, yeah, I see you, but your buddy's still there. You're not fooling anybody.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think.
Airsoft.
You know, Milsim West really did resolve that by like, because they'll bully you too. Like there is some bullying in the Milsim West community if you do dumb things, and if you don't drop down when you're dead and you start whining about getting shot, people will just start yelling at like the maximum volume, "Airsoft!"
I've seen that in people's videos. I didn't understand it.
Okay.
Yeah, like anytime people start arguing over dumb airsofty things, everyone just starts yelling "Airsoft."
That's amazing.
That's a good way to handle that.
Yeah, we should bring that to more places.
So good.
I also
try to
like
spread
that
it as I can.
I think it's way better than red.
Eric, I'll make a deal with you. I'll spread the airsoft thing if you spread the Plasto Blasto thing. That's
Blasto. Okay,
I spread that all
got it.
weekend. Tell him.
Yeah,
Every time
You did.
you had the
every
shirt
time
on.
somebody's like, no, every time somebody's like, hey, take a picture with me with Eric, the Gun Gamers guy. I'm like, I bet he is. Yeah, everybody say Plasto Blasto.
Yeah.
Nice. I love it. I actually had someone on the podcast last week who said Plasto Blasto unprompted, and I was like, my 2023 is made. Like,
Hell yeah,
this
brother.
is done.
I had so much fun. Then when I came out of a doorway after shooting somebody and his friend with the machine gun shot me 17 times, I was not upset. I went, the whole way. It was delightful. Dude, the whole thing was great.
You RP'd the whole thing, right?
Oh, yeah. Dude, like, I was, like everything up against the wall. I hit a wall. I fell down. I was like, the whole way.
Now, imagine that from that other guy's perspective now. He's like, I came in through the doorway, there was this guy, and I lit him up with my machine gun, and he was just like in an action movie. Imagine how he feels about that.
Yeah, I hope he feels great, dude. It was a beautiful kill. All up and down. It was amazing.
There were two
That's
times, like at lunch and later that same night, that we go back to the car, we go somewhere, and I'm like taking my belt off. You know, it's like a Velcro inner outer belt, and I peel
As
it
all
off.
the pros use.
BBs just falling off of me. And Sam goes, "Did you call all those hits?" And I'm like, "Yeah, the guy with the saw who lit my back up. Yeah, I totally called that."
They were heavy machine guns on the other side.
Yeah, I was on the receiving end of one of those 50 rounds per second SMGs. Oh. Yeah, it's an experience. You really don't question your death when.
But it's only it's only a duel, Sam.
Yeah. I had a fun one. Was it the end of the? I think it was the end of the first day. I'm walking through somewhere, being all tactical and stuff, thinking I'm totally sneaking, and this dude just totally had me dead to rights. Shoots once, hits my gun, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so dead right now." And he just like stopped, and I stopped, and I looked at him, and I go, "Gun hit?" And then he shot me again. And I was like, "Okay, there you go, you win." I didn't try to like duck down or run and hide or anything. I was like, "Oh no, I'm so busted right now. I'm gonna let."
I remember that. Like a little head tilt. You're like, gun hit. Oh
yeah.
Sam is a
so
very
funny.
Honorable player. I will say that.
Dude, there were a lot of honorable players there. I heard parlay more than once when somebody thought they were wrong. Like, that's my bad.
I heard like a relatively average amount of airsoft arguing, but like there was never any like serious unsportsmanlike BS.
I completely agree. Yeah, every experience I had was a good one.
I had some guy yelling at me in Russian. I like that. That was the only engagement where I wish I had the MP5 inside a building, because they had a saw and they also had an MP5K that was set to 1 joule so it could go full auto.
Yeah.
And I know that's what they shot the crap out of me with, but and I was like, hit. and all of a sudden I could hear people back there chattering, and they didn't, the guy that we were with, this was the very last thing that Sam and I did on Sunday afternoon. Eric he's like getting people, he's like, okay, who wants violence? And he was getting people stoked and just, okay, everyone come with me. We're going to the right. And Sam and I are like, nah, we're going to go to the left because that's closer to the parking lot.
Plus, weren't you going left all weekend anyway? Like, wasn't that your MO?
We had to go left.
That literally became like our squad battle cry, right?
Yeah.
Section 1,
we went
go
to the
left.
Because it was in this particular rotation of the field, that was going to be closer to the parking lot. And we were done at that point. I mean, I think the game had a half hour, maybe 45 minutes left.
It was like 30. There was like 30 minutes left.
Yeah, exactly.
It just goes to show, though, and I love to hear stuff like this, because like just really goes to show that all the drama and stuff that you see on social media and YouTube and all this stuff about airsoft, that's not what it's like. That's not right. Like, yeah, you get the airsoft arguing and stuff like that, but for the most part, I've been playing airsoft 17 years this year, and the amount of times that I've seen drama happen at the field, I mean, I can count on one hand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. True.
And it's if people if people are listening to this, number one, but you're seeing this content on YouTube where people are arguing and like burning patches and full autoing people out of, like reprisal. And it's like, that's not what happens. Like, that is not a fair.
That's not
assumption.
the majority.
Most of the time, it's a bunch of nerds dressed up in all kinds of different kinds of cosplay, whether you call it cosplay or not.
It's
cosplay. Just
I call it BB LARP.
Yeah, or Plasto Blasto, as we discussed.
Blasto, yeah.
Blasto.
But yeah, guys, I feel very grateful for you guys coming on to talk to me about BFLA. I'm also a little envious, to be honest, but park that for
next
later.
Time.
We'll see.
You got a year plan, bro.
Yeah.
I will furnish your gear if you fly out here. I will bring you my extra.
That's what's going to have to happen, because I'm not flying with my own gear. Let me tell you.
Listen,
I'll get there, but I'm not coming back.
I don't have any extra guns.
All you have to do
zero.
is spend years working with and befriending Jet and Josh, and then getting them to pay you to come out. That is.
Yes, that sounds like a plan.
That's all it takes.
I'll start doing
right now. Yeah. Or simpler plan, I will just save the money and fly myself out, which is what the plan is currently. But regardless, guys, I can't thank you so much for coming on. It's been awesome talking to you about this. It sounds like you had an absolute blast. I'm very, very grateful for all your stories. For those of you who are listening, if you want to keep the conversation going, we do have our Discord. The link is in the description below. You can find all of these clowns on the Discord, sharing their stories, sharing their pictures. It's an amazing time, and if you want more details, I'm sure they're happy to have a conversation with you. But until then, that's all we've got for you. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.